let's have the second keynote speaker, Mr. Cesar Jung-Harada. He's the founder and the CEO of the MakerBay. Maker is definitely a very hot topic in the education field because students are allowed to make their own ideas come true. And he graduated in the Royal College of Arts, London, in the Design Interaction Department. He is a professional speaker, and also he gave a TED Talk on about how I teach kids to love science. So today, his topic is how Hong Kong young people can do to help the ocean and themselves. So please join me to welcome Mr. Jung-Harada.
Oh, okay, you want me to speak here? Okay, sure. Wow, I cannot see you guys because it's so bright. Okay. All right, so thank you very much for your invitation and the introduction. As you mentioned, I'm very interested to see how young people and educators like yourself can actually have a tangible impact in the environment. And maybe I'm coming less from a conservation perspective, but more from a technology perspective and design perspective. So bear with me if it's a little bit different. Also, I would like to really say how much I really enjoy your presentation and how much it gives me hope for, because I'm going to join academia as well. This conference is jointly organized with the HKU, and I'm joining HKU as a senior lecturer in August. And so what you've demonstrated and how you've grown the department and how you've encouraged many young people is very, very encouraging for me as well. So thank you so much. I'd like to talk about citizen science and my passion for citizen science. This is the definition of citizen science if you go and say Wikipedia. So if you go on Wikipedia, you will see this. It's basically a way that regular people, they don't necessarily have a degree in anything related to science, but they can contribute to science. And I think you also shown that actually in the presentation when you saw fishermen and the local people, they can bring the turtles, they can also collect data. However, in this presentation, I would like to also challenge that idea in the sense that I think citizens can do even much more than just collect the data. I think the citizen science increasingly can create the instrument to collect the data, and that thanks a lot to a lot of new technologies. And the third is actually that even the way and intensity at which they participate potentially could actually change how we do science in the future. So it's a little bit kind of an anticipation or like kind of thinking about the future of science. It's hopeful, maybe a little bit provocative, and I'm very excited as well to have discussion after that. So I'll be speaking about different experiments that I've been working on. Most of them are collective, so I'm really speaking as well from the perspective of teamwork. The first will be about oil spill technology, the second about radioactivity-related technology, the third about coral reef, the last one about plastic and how to track plastic and do plastic measurements. And what I think is the future of citizen science. So I'll start with the first one. So the BP oil spill. So that was back in 2010. So for me, I kind of was dropped in the world of citizen science pretty much by accident, I would say. I was a construction manager in Kenya, in Nairobi, and I was managing a construction site. I was basically, this is me being a picture taken by my collaborator of me sleeping on a construction site, and I would be just arriving in Nairobi and managing this site, and it was a very energetic place. You would see a sign like this on the street, the future is here. In the first week I was in Nairobi, I met 3 people who told me they want to become the president of the country. And I just got in charge of a place where basically there was just a logo on the wall, just an idea to create the largest co-working or like incubator for mobile or like technology in East Africa. And so I was managing the construction site, so people who are tiling the floor, painters, electricians, welders, and network, people who build the network, the internet. And over a couple of months, we actually built the largest co-working space in East Africa that was also the host of a really hot startup back then called Ushahidi. But within the space, we hosted hundreds of events and found jobs in the tech industry for thousands of young East Africans. But at the same time, on the other side of the world, there was a big environmental accident that happened. That was the BP oil spill. It was the largest environmental accident in the history of Northern America. And 130 million gallons of oil went into the sea and destroyed the livelihood of thousands of people. And it turns out, at the other end of the world, in Nairobi, the building I was essentially designing and engineering was actually the home of a software company that I started working for part-time. And this company was called Ushahidi, and we're receiving hundreds of reports. So it was 2010, and so back then, like geotagging was quite new on mobile phones. Mobile phones were quite new on themselves, but basically people could use their mobile phones, they could take a picture and automatically upload it and create a map of real-time issues in the environment, or political issues, or just whatever they could see, they could actually report it on a website. And there was a small nonprofit called the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, a tiny nonprofit in the Gulf of Mexico, that deployed our software, and they started to receive thousands of reports of the residents. And very quickly, because we were a startup, we were using an under-defined database, which means that anybody could give us a report. And then we started collecting data that nobody else was collecting. For example, the government or existing nonprofit would collect hard evidence. Let's say, for example, they would take tissue damage. When people touch the oil or the Corexit, they would get the skin damage. So that's hard evidence. But then they didn't necessarily take into account people who start to have headaches, for example, or bad smell because you have the oil getting close to shore. But with this database that people report, we get much, much more data. And so quite quickly, we saw that the response was inappropriate. They deployed hundreds, I think 700 of these boats, but they only collected 3% of the oil that was coming from the bottom of the sea. So that was very insufficient. Still, a lot of oil was washing ashore. And as the catastrophe was unraveling, I was really getting frustrated. And I got in touch with people that I knew back from in MIT, and I told them that I had this data set that may be of interest of them. And so they proposed me to join. After I joined, the first thing I did is that I organized an expedition in the Gulf of Mexico, and I like to tell the story of one of the first people I met on the crime scene, if you will. He's out of the frame, but he's on the left side of the picture, and he was the captain. We took an appointment with him, so he would take us on the BP oil spill, and he arrived on a wheelchair. And I was really surprised that he has 2 legs missing. He was the captain, but he couldn't stand up. And he basically threw himself in the boat, and while we are going to the BP oil spill, I asked him what happened to his legs. And he told me that he's lost his first leg during Katrina because there was a giant storm, and so he was fishing and he was trying to make a living, and then he lost one leg then, and he lost a couple of his boats and a couple of his men. And a couple of years after recovering, he was trying to recover his business, and so he was working both day and night shift, working very hard, and his second leg got caught into a hoist, so he lost his second leg while fishing in machinery. And so now that he's lost his job because he couldn't fish anymore during the BP oil spill, all that he could do was to go and take people on the oil spill. And so while we were doing our scientific work, collecting data, collecting samples of oil, he was telling us stories of his friends who are losing their job, who are breaking their families, some of them suicide because they lost everything to Katrina and then oil spill. Suddenly it really became clear to me that when we're doing environmental work, it's not really environmental work alone. Like the life of people, the environment is affected. And so this is when I decided that really I couldn't just do research work. I really wanted to do that was applied research. And so I started meeting a lot of people who were suffering, and even if they work on the BP oil spill, but they're still suffering from it. And I was working in a really amazing university. I had access to amazing facility. We had the best robotics lab facility you could imagine. We have an amazing sailing club. It was like paradise. But still, the people on the front line were suffering, and the research that we were doing was not really affecting them in any direct way. So I decided to quit my dream job at MIT. So I worked there for a couple of months on the BP oil spill, but I grew increasingly frustrated that we are not having a real effect. And so I moved to the Gulf of Mexico, where I lived for 2 years. And while I was working there, I just started to volunteer in small local nonprofits, and we were not allowed to get close to the oil. So we could not get close to the oil. It was illegal. You would get a felony, which would mean for me deportation. So I couldn't do that. And so I wanted to know how we can best help local population to fight against the pollution. And what we found is that they couldn't even build their own evidence. They couldn't go to the court and ask BP to clean their acts. So we try to help them document. So we fly balloons or we fly drones, and we take thousands of pictures of the BP oil spill. So basically, they would go, we will fly a balloon, and we'll have a camera attached to the balloon, helium, and then we will stitch those images together. And then we will help to basically build evidence that they could take to court, or in this case, make a study of an oyster reef that was used as a depollution. So they want to see how effective an oyster reef would be to remove the oil from the water. So this is the kind of picture, very high resolution that we'll be doing. That would be much cheaper than the satellite imagery, and that could be on demand. When the citizens, local residents, they see the oil, they could go and take pictures. And so we help a lot of people go to the court and ask for environmental justice. So the first thing I'd like to mention is that citizen science, when done with the citizens, with universities or with nonprofit, can actually help people claim environmental justice. And in a place like Hong Kong, this is also something that you can do. If you see something that you disagree with, environmental pollution or development which are careless, if you see that population are being impacted, you can actually contribute to those efforts, collect data and do something for your own neighborhood, for your own school, so you can actually really do something and make a change. While I was working on the BP oil spill, I was very interested of how I could improve the cleanup operation. And so I started to I just asked to a friend, like, do you know where I could do some work? And I found an old lady, a grandma, that could lend me her garage. And I started hacking electronics in her garage. The first thing I thought is that an oil spill is a man-made catastrophe, but it's controlled by natural forces, namely the wind, surface currents, and the waves. And I thought, well, a sailboat is controlled by the wind. What about I use the wind to pull an oil absorbent, a sorbent, and try to catch something with it. And I started designing sailboats that would be optimized for oil collection. And so I started making a boat with a front rudder and then one with those two rudders, one at the front, one at the back. And eventually I just stumbled upon this idea, what about I make a shape-shifting boat, a boat that the whole hull will be curved. So like this I would have more control over my payload. And I started making this prototype, and I just posted it on YouTube, and I researched, like, is this patented already? Is there scientific papers around this? And it turned out that actually nobody had patented this technology. That was a new technology. And I was really surprised, because this is how fish swim. And I thought this surely must have been patented by somebody, but actually it wasn't. And so I registered this technology with a CERN license, so the Large Hadron Collider. Has a license that allows you to do open hardware license, and find out there's many new properties to having a shape-shifting hull. You can navigate up the wind more efficiently. You can expose your sail area to different angles to the wind. You can control a larger and heavier payload. So it gives you a whole array of new possibilities in sailing. And the way we're prototyping this is very much like a biological process, almost like evolutionary, which means that most of our prototypes are pretty crap and they fail. But we've been building many prototypes, and for example, that's a $50 prototype. It's made of plastic found from the hardware shop, PVC pipes, and cables. So this was extremely cheap research. But this one was more expensive. This one we fundraised money on Kickstarter, which I will explain, which we built in the Netherlands. So this one is 3 meters. It's entirely automated. We have many motors inside. We built an international team to actually build this. It's 3 meters and can pull and control a payload of 25 meters. And this were the tests in the Netherlands, where we assembled a small team of researchers. And this is the picture we've taken maybe 5 years ago in Hong Kong, where we started to manufacture them. So now we see that there is an interest in the research community, and we start to manufacture them, and some other scientists are buying those to test the physics of it. So the reason why I want to mention this is that this came from citizen science originally, and with the same spirit, we're starting to do technology development. 2 years after, we started publishing on our open source website. NASA and Boeing announced that they're also starting to fund research in shape-shifting airplane wings. And actually, a couple of months ago, they've announced by 2025 they will release airplane wings on the market. So in the future, you will have airplanes with shape-shifting wings. And they significantly improve control of airplanes, improve reliability, reduce the amount of fuel that you need, so hence the carbon emission, because you need less fuel, and it's also less dangerous for passengers, so there's less chance of crashing. And again, it's just how birds also will fly. So originally the project was not biomimicry, but kind of we are now going towards biomimicry because we can see that nature has the most elegant solutions. We don't know how the technology can scale, but we think that we can make it in very many different scales, from small boats to very large boats. So we're still trying to drill down the science to understand how big this technology could be. We are very excited. We want to make these boats in the next few years in Hong Kong. So maybe you will see some very, very strange boats and people crashing in the water. That might be us. And so we hope that we can make those boats, and we're looking for sponsors. So as we were developing this theory behind a shape-shifting boat to drag an oil boom, we realized that means that if we can make a boat that can be shape-shifting, it means that the boat could be potentially modular. And so these are tests in Stanley Beach, so this is in Hong Kong, and you could see that we have a 3-section boat. And we were thinking, oh wow, this is pretty cool. How long can we get? And so we started to make those renders and thinking, wow, this is crazy. This is like a train. Can we actually build this? And we got some sponsorship from a guy in Estonia. And so we went to Estonia and we tested this on the supermarket parking lot. And we could see, wow, this thing is working. So this machine is 3.5 meters. There's only one tiny motor that controls the angle of the front wheel. And we could see that with a tiny motor and just one point of control, you can control a large vehicle. And we were kind of in disbelief, like, could this scale? And so we went back to Hong Kong, and then we built the larger vehicle. It's 6.5 meters, so it's longer than a car, most cars. And it's just a few grams heavy, and it's controlled only by one tiny servo motor. So it's basically controlled with less energy from a mobile phone you can control something larger than a car. And we found that the larger and the heavier it gets, and the faster it gets, and the less energy we need, because we have less friction on the front wheel. So what we're trying to find now is that you can actually make larger and heavier and more complex vehicle, and they can be controlled with less energy and less complexity. So it's kind of a shift in how we think about transportation and potentially how we think about cleanup in the ocean. So we've tried to simplify the model in some aspects of mechanics, but try to see as well like how resistant it would be to say wrong control. if we have bad software, can the hardware kind of make it comply? And we did this experiment in Qatar, in Doha, and what we see is that you could have 5 people controlling each joint, and you could still control the machine after a little bit of training. And we've tried to work with very, very young people as well to see if you can make something that is a seemingly complex technology with very, very young people. And the answer is that yes, it is possible. It's not the same output, obviously, but it doesn't mean that it's got to be super complex, and you don't need to be at MIT to do something interesting, basically. All this technology that I'm showing to you, they are all open source. The hardware is under a CERN license, so it's the same like Large Hadron Collider. GPL is a very common software, open source software license. Creative Commons is a common documentation license. And trademark is basically the only thing we want to control is our trademark, because sometimes we want to make products that we want to be able to sell. So you can make a commercial product and sell it under multiple open source license, and you can also multi-license. You can have a free version for schools and say non-profits, and if you have a commercial client, they have to pay for it. That's possible to do that. All the stuff that we do, we document. This is our website. If you go there, you will see new prototypes. But we document even the bad prototypes. Actually, it's very important for us to show the bad prototypes because we want to share everything, because we want to get the feedback. So we share the fabrication files. We share the simulation files before we actually make the prototype. And when we do the testing, this is a test in San Francisco, we actually show our failed test as well. And so we pride ourselves to have many, many failures and ask feedback from our professional, and we ask them to give us the tough love. And so here you can see a test is typically quite a destructive process. We do a prototype, and it's pretty bad. And we have to keep changing the prototype during the testing. And like we have to basically trim the prototype and improve it, and things almost never work the way it should. But this is how we make progress and how we learn. This is typically our website. We see like a first version of documentation and a second version with a red marker of like good people who are knowledgeable who give us some feedback. And you could see as well version made by different people who've done something which is quite different from the original technology. And this is exactly what we want. We want people to make this technology their own and make their own version. Being open source has allowed us to crowdfund. We were the third project, which was a scientific project on Kickstarter back in the days in 2011. Now you have many product and big campaign. Back then, $33,000 on Kickstarter was a lot. Now $33,000 on Kickstarter is like ridiculously small, but back then it was one of the big campaigns. And so we could raise money in an open source way because we are very transparent in how we process. And it has allowed us to grow a network of enthusiastic people. So let's say mathematicians in Chile were giving us feedback. We have a towing tank in Brazil. We have a mechanical engineer in the Netherlands and some mathematicians in China and Japan, physics professor in Australia. So because we're open source and we're online, it means that we can work almost a decentralized, distributed way. And so we don't use expensive tools. We use free tools most of the time, like Google Docs and Skype, just a video conference. And when we have money, when we get a grant, this is when we get together to build stuff. So fast forward, 2011, 2014, I was trying to do this as a PhD, but it didn't really work very well. I didn't get the grants that I wanted, and I ended up being homeless for a while. Like the company had crazy ups and downs. But eventually, we keep applying for grants, and I got into an incubator that was actually on a floating university. So what you see here is actually a floating university. It's a school inside of a ship. And that was pretty cool. And inside of this university, they also have an incubator for entrepreneurs. And they made a call for entrepreneurs that would have technologies that are related to either ocean or that can be scaled in different countries. And so about 1,000 people applied, and I was very lucky to be one of the 10 people to get on this boat. And so what we would be doing then is to test and build more boats and test it in every port that would be landing in. So I was really lucky to try to build different versions of the boats for different parts of the ocean. And so we sailed around the world in about 4 months. And we had mentors like the VC of Google, the co-founder of the D School of Stanford, some astrophysicians from Google X who work on a project Loon, like the globalized internet, like some really amazing engineers, designers, and business people. And so this was a typical classroom settings where being mentored on the back deck. And so we're sailing around the world, and this is actually how I came to Hong Kong. I came to Hong Kong by ship. And I came here and I fell in love with the place. I literally was amazed by the city and how dynamic it is, and by you people. Like I felt that Hong Kong people are really incredibly well educated. They have such a dynamic lifestyle, and I also went to Shenzhen side to meet my suppliers. And I found that my bill of material, if I build my robots in San Francisco versus building my robots in Shenzhen, it would be 7 times cheaper in Shenzhen and 4 times faster. And so I talked to my investor and I say, do you think I should stay in San Francisco? And they're like, no way, you have to go to Hong Kong and you have to go to Shenzhen. And so I met my suppliers and we became good friends, and they sponsored the project a little bit. And then I compared the bill of materials, and I compare different cities that I sailed around, and I looked at how much freedom do I get? Can I start a company? Is it safe for my female coworker to go back home late at night when they work at the lab? Is there good food? Is it easy to get a visa? And all these considerations, and Hong Kong was extremely high. And I feel that Hong Kong is the best place in the world to develop technology, especially robotics technology, because you have the capacity of manufacturing from mainland China, and you have the freedom of the West. You have access to internet, basically, and you have access to traveling around the world. You have access to funding. You have so much freedom, basically. So I feel that Hong Kong is the most amazing place, and I think oftentimes Hong Kongers don't, especially if you're born here, you don't realize that. But I can tell you, after sailing around the world and evaluating and spending hours like compiling data of trying to make a choice of which city I should set up my business operation, I can confidently tell you that Hong Kong is the most amazing place to do like ocean technology. Also because this is becoming the world's largest city, and you are at the heart of it, in the kind of the most ancient part of that place. So I was still a broke inventor. I didn't have the support from MIT. I didn't have the support from my UK university or American investor. So I arrived in Hong Kong, and I basically have to make a place for myself. I didn't know anybody, and so I just called people, and I just found that a friend of mine from my studies in London was actually from Hong Kong, and he told me that his family used to have a chicken farm in the New Territories, in Kam Tin, in a village. And after the chicken farm was forbidden to do in Hong Kong, they transformed the chicken farm in a bulletproof truck factory. And so I asked them that there was an old broken building, and asked them, can I live in the old chicken farm? And they say, yeah, sure. And so I destroyed the old chicken farm, replaced the concrete slab, bring a new roof, new water, installed the electricity in the chicken farm, and I built all the stuff that I had access to at MIT. So all the lab that I had access to, I tried to replicate all the same facility and try to make it very small and very, very efficient. And so this is where I started manufacturing those robots that I showed you in the video. So what I'm trying to bring it to is that Hong Kong is an amazing place, and citizen science not only can help you to make environmental discovery, help with local residents to improve their environment, improve their livelihood, but also it can be a way to accidentally make technical or scientific discovery for yourself. Okay, I just want to keep my eye on the time. Okay, about half of the time. I'm also going to drink because I speak way too fast. So I know it's not clearly visible on my face, but I'm actually half Japanese. So my father is Japanese and my mother is French. And so half of my family lives in Japan. And maybe you remember in 2011, is that right? There was a gigantic earthquake off the coast of Japan. And there was a very big tsunami that destroyed a big part of the eastern coast of Japan, sorry. And so 14,000 people were killed almost immediately by the tsunami who could not evacuate. But also, maybe you know that the nuclear power plant was severely crippled, and there were several hydrogen explosions and a core meltdown. And so a lot of people know about radioactivity on land and in the air, but few people are aware that even today, radioactivity is keeping leaking into the ocean. This is a simulation of cesium-137, and you could see on the top left hand the timeline. And you could see that after about 2 years, Hong Kong coast is less radioactive than, for example, the West Coast in California. So most radioactivity is not a national problem, it's an international issue. And so because this happened, a group of citizen scientists gather and they decide to develop their own radioactivity sensor. That was the SafeCast project. And I was excited by it because my family lived close, and I felt that they were not correctly informed about the risk. Especially a few years after the Fukushima power plant accident, 2 people in my family suffered from cancer. So I felt very, very concerned about radioactivity in this area, and I started to contribute. So I went several times to Fukushima, and then I started teaching in Hong Kong. And I was really, really concerned with some recent data that was coming out of Japan. And these are my students in Hong Kong, and I told them, hey, would you be interested to work on radioactivity in Hong Kong? And so my students, they are very young. They were just second or primary school students, and they start to measure radioactivity in this classroom. Maybe they have some, fluorescent marking that's a little bit radioactive, and then they thought, oh, okay, radioactivity is supposed to accumulate in the esophagus, so maybe they want to test the esophagus, and they want to understand, like I told them that granite is a more radioactive mineral, so they go and climb on the top of the mountain to measure radioactivity, and eventually we mapped the radioactivity in Hong Kong, and we could see actually Hong Kong is generally more radioactive than Japan because of the terrain, and the geology of Hong Kong is actually more radioactive because it's a lot of rocks, basically. And I asked my students that I want to go to Japan, and I asked them to remotely control the teacher. So I will become the guinea pig, and they will tell me where I should go to make measurements. So every day I would check with them, and they would tell me where I should go to make maximum height measurements and minimum measurements, and make some models of trying to predict where radioactivity will go. So we go to the Fukushima nuclear power plant, we meet the local scientists. These are my students. They are trying to tell me where is the best place to do science in Fukushima. And what we did is that we're looking at the map and the real-time radioactivity data, and we're trying to make some forecast of radioactivity in the area. And to do that, we decided that we're going to make a analog simulation. So we're going to make a simulation of the weather forecast and radioactivity levels. There was some preliminary research that said that the radioactivity level changed depending on the rainfall. And we were thinking, wow, this is kind of strange. Why is rainfall has an effect on radioactivity? And so we built a model of the elevation of Fukushima area, and then we use red powder to put the real-time data of where radioactivity is now found. And then we spray water, like rain, based on the forecast of next week of rainfall. And so we could see that, okay, we predict that the radioactive particles or the dust would basically go from the top of the mountain, being washed into the rivers, and then go into the estuary. And then the high levels that we could see at the top of the mountain before the rain and after, we could basically correlate those and prove that radioactivity is seasonal. And in the monsoon season, there's actually more radioactivity in the ocean, which would affect how fisheries operate. And so we made this model, and then we went to measure from top of the mountain into the river. We organized an expedition very near the power plant. So this is 1.5 kilometers away from the Fukushima power plant. And then we worked with the local fishermen, and we developed a new instrument to collect surface sediments. We collect the surface sediments, and then we found that there were abnormal high levels of radioactivity after monsoon and this season, which was new findings. As you can see, we are not using any protection. We are 1.5 kilometers away from nuclear power plants, but we don't wear any gloves or anything. I mean, just half of us. It's because the Japanese government was restarting fisheries, and they want to restart the industry. So they didn't want people to freak out. So they were saying, like, you know, you have to make it look like it's safe, even if we don't really know if it was safe. So that's the other reason why we're so concerned about the health of the fishermen, but also all the people that consume the fish that's exported from Japan. And so this is the instrument that we built. We developed this because the traditional instrument to collect radioactivity data from sediments is a box. It's called an Ekman grab. It's basically a box. It has two jaws. You collect sediments, but it's a mix of old sediments and new sediments. But we wanted to have a snapshot of the most recent sediments. So we had to develop this very low cost, $50 roughly, tube that can basically catch just the surface sediment with like a razor kind of blade that just scraps the few millimeters of surface powder. And we collaborated with the local university. It was tested in like best facilities to measure radioactivity from the sediment. And then we mapped all this data and we distributed it back to the fishermen so that they could make their own decision, or they could talk to the government and tell them, we have abnormal levels of radioactivity right here. Maybe we should actually pay attention to the seasonality of radioactivity and change the fishing seasons. So the idea here that I'm trying to make an argument is that the citizens can actually advance how science is made. They can develop new instruments. May they be children, may they be a top researcher. And so also they can collect the data, even if the government doesn't want them to get this data necessarily, in the case of Japan. So that's very, very important, is that sometimes the citizens have to collect the data themselves because they may have different stakes. Yeah. The next project I want to talk to you about is coral reef mapping. Hong Kong has amazing coral reef biodiversity, actually more than the Caribbean. When you think about Caribbean, everybody think about coral, but actually Hong Kong has more diversity than the Caribbean. When you think about coral, you think about this very colorful thing, but actually a lot of it is dying now at a very fast rate. In fact, one of the fastest rates. But the coral reef is one of the most important ecosystems because it's the nursery of the ocean. A lot of the animals reproduce there. The way we measure coral reef right now is very old and kind of ridiculous to me. We take a quadrat, we swim, we put it on the coral, we take a picture, we go and take it back, and then we move it to the next place. And then we compare the color with a color gauge, and we take it on a small notebook or on a plate on your arm. It's super slow, it's expensive, and it's kind of inaccurate. So with my students in Hong Kong, I asked them, they are high school students, I asked them, this is the state of the art. Can we do better than that? And so we look at different technology, and then one of the students came up with this idea. What about we use lasers? We use lasers, and we are going to, so we thought, okay, where can we find a laser? We just went to the corner shop in a hardware store, and we buy this tool, which is used by construction industry to align things in a building. And then the students, they learn STEM kind of accidentally. We have to build a laser device, so they learn how to take a laser apart. They have to learn electronics, they have to rewire the things. They have to learn about optics and how to line up lasers. And so we built this device. And so we didn't know if it was going to work, so we brought the very creative student to the very knowledgeable professor in HKU in SWIMS, and then they allowed us to test our device in Hoiha 1. And then we tested our device, and we can actually measure coral reef remotely. So you can orient our device in any direction, and you can know the size of the coral you're looking at without putting an object. So we posted online, and then another group of students who were older, university students, saw that research on Instructable, which is a website for inventors, and they were really enthused by it. And they thought, what about we take this technology further? And so we wrote a grant to go to the Philippines. And so we got a grant from HKU, the Garland Ho program. And this is the team of students from HKU, from computer science, mechanical engineering, business, design, arts, and then we organized this expedition. And we built the electronics in Hong Kong, but we built the robots in the jungle. So we basically built the body of the robot with a machete in the Philippine jungle. And then we found the flotation material as trash on the beach. So we found some plastic bottle, and we used it to actually build our robots. So what this is basically a drone that floats around, and it takes thousands of pictures of the coral. We assembled them using AI and computer vision. We stitch them together, and we make super high resolution 2D maps. We make population study, and we also make 3D maps with this technology. So like this, you can see the growth and the change of color, and also damage from, say, a storm. This is the latest prototype. It's now being tested by AFCD in Hong Kong on 2 sites. And so we hope that we can prove that we can do a good job, and that we hope to map all the coral reefs in Hong Kong. We have 33 sites. If we can prove that our machine can scan the ocean floor very fast, then we hope that we can map all the coral reef of Hong Kong in the next few years. So our idea is that we have better accuracy because we have a GPS on the surface. So we're not like the diver who are underwater. We can see exactly where we are. So it's about 10 times more accurate for geolocation. It's about 50 times faster. We don't need to go up and down. Using algorithms and filters, we can basically like overlay many images. And we are about 200 times cheaper because you basically have one person on the beach that deploys the boat. You don't need to have dive team. You don't need to have bottles. You don't need to feed people. They can operate 6 hours in one day during the good times. So we hope that we can make a technology that can improve coral reef mapping speed by 100,000 times. So what I'm trying to say is that citizen science can combine developing new technology, addressing environmental issues, and helping to do conservation efforts. And the last project I'd like to mention is also something we're doing right now. So as the previous speaker talked about plastic pollution, and Hong Kong has a huge plastic pollution problem. In the past, a lot of Hong Kongers assumed that all the plastic comes from China. But it was demonstrated that a lot of plastic comes from Hong Kong that has a very low rate of recycling. So we wanted to understand how much plastic that Hong Kongers drop in the street, how much of it goes into the sea, and how quickly it travels from the drain system into the ocean system and then goes further internationally. And so we build ocean trackers, basically small ocean devices, similar to animal trackers. We try to make them 10 times cheaper. So normal ocean tracker, maybe 2,000 USD. Maybe you can tell me like the cost. I'm not sure. But ours cost $50 US. Battery, housing, SIM card, data plan included. So we hack it in the streets of Hong Kong, in Mong Kok and Sham Shui Po, and we build it from existing parts that we could find online. We make a database. This is with WWF. And then we collect the location of the drifters. We start to make one drifter. It worked out OK. And we found that actually the trash you see in Hong Kong beach travel from one beach to another. It's not like you put the trash in one place and it stays there. No, it will go from one beach to another beach and come back many, many times. So sometimes it may mean that the way we quantify pollution in Hong Kong may be wrong because we may be measuring the same pollution multiple times. We collect our own drifter, and then we saw that our drifter was becoming trash itself. So we're feeling frustrated, and WWF made us the request to make our drifter more eco-friendly. And so instead of using plastic, we use a coconut to actually make the housing of our electronics. So we used the coconuts, and it was a very fun way to make science because we eat many coconuts every day. And then we want to replace the waterproofing with cork and wax. So it will be completely biodegradable. And we make many composite material that we try, and we test it in coconut and in many rivers in Hong Kong. And we try to reduce the electronic size and try to make paper and copper electronics in-house to make the electronics simpler. And then we work with 11 schools. Each school built 10 drifters. And all the school kids, actually, we make it simple enough that the school kids can build the drifters. And we deployed 110 drifters in 2 weeks. And we put them in many, many parts of Hong Kong. And we found that actually we verify ocean circulation models. And we also find that you can put a trash in Hong Kong water, and 1 month later it will be in Taipei, and about 1 month later it will be in Japan. So the trash problem in Hong Kong is not a Hong Kong problem. Again, this is a global problem. So after this one, this was 2 years ago, WWF has asked us to do a new version, but this time they want us to have a global drifter. So something not connected with a SIM card, but something connected to satellite. So it's a lot more expensive. So they asked us to do a transversal study of the different drifter technology that exists out there. And now we're trying to make global drifters 10 times cheaper and last longer. And so this was about 4 months ago. We make our drifter and we try in Saikung. And this is the drifter we tried maybe 3 months ago. And this was maybe 2 months ago. We made maybe 20 generations, 20 versions of the drifter. And this is the one that we built last week. So we make new calculation of optimizing the surface area of solar panels using better materials. This was like 5 days ago. This was yesterday. And tonight I'm going back to the lab and putting the batteries in, and we hope to be deploying tomorrow in Hong Kong water. You can see that the new design is like a sea nettle, because it's been reported that the drifter will be populated by a lot of animal, there will be bite marks on drifters. So we're trying to make something that looks like a life form that is toxic so animals don't mess with it. So citizen science can be a way to understand bigger challenge, even of something we don't really understand yet. Like we know plastic is a problem, but because we don't know exactly where it is or to what quantity, we still need to know a lot more about, and we need to act urgently upon it. We also organized the first citizen science fair. It was in 2017 in PMQ. We organized many workshops, and we also have a home. So MakerBay is our home. All the experience that I've shown you, they were somehow produced or co-produced by MakerBay, which is kind of a co-working space. It's not a school, it's not a university. We found that there was a problem. Like everybody, like myself, like a designer or other people like engineers or scientists or architects, fashion designer, they need a place to make stuff. And so I was a broke inventor when I came, and I was working in a chicken farm. I was offered space in Science Park, but it was not flexible enough for me. So I found an old broken factory that was a couple of years ago, and we repaired it, and now we have built this place that can be like a factory of everything with the community and lots of volunteers. This is the volunteers repairing the space. This is my wife on the left. We got married shortly after working so hard together. And we found that girls like to do heavy-duty work, and we found that guys like to do like the finishing work, the painting work, the light touches at the end. And we have this great space where you have a wood workshop, metal workshop, electronics, textile, leather, jewelry, biology, chemistry, acoustics, optics. You can basically build any device that you could dream of. And in the last few years, we've helped hundreds of other projects come off the ground. So not only citizen science project, but building an autonomous electric car, vehicles for the elderly, lights in the air, balloon, shelters for the homeless, like furniture for the refugees, prosthetics for handicapped kids, prosthetics for animals, machines to collect cigarette butts on the beach, renewable wind turbines, stuff to grow food in your home, repair cafes, and we helped several startups to fundraise money and then to become quite big. But what I'm most excited is that now we are growing into schools. So we have helped develop several school makerspace with a simplified version of our innovation model, which is like design thinking, but for children, which is just 3 steps of, because I think in Hong Kong, we ask the kids usually to be very smart, but we forget about making them care about the environment, making them love the sea, making love the animals. So we usually start by love, and then we touch, and after that we think. And so a makerspace like ours allows to collaborate with the school, collaborate with the government, collaborate with the industry, and we have also started a foundation. So last year we started a foundation, and we got a grant from the Jockey Club, and they help us to move into the youth center. So the Jockey Club helped us to go into the youth center in the low-income area where we open makerspaces, and now we have opened in 6 youth centers, and we are looking to work in also other schools. We also started to do international programs. We have these programs in Cambodia where we do innovation for agriculture. So this is working with the agriculture students or engineer students and the local farmers. This was in Norway where we do the hackathon to do with ocean technology. And we did another one in France that we are going to do very soon. This summer, I'll be teaching a program at HKU called Design Plus. If you're interested to do this kind of environmental programs, it's going to be the registration, I think, closed in like 5 days, so it's very, very soon. We offer internship. But why do I speak to you about citizen science, and why do I think it's important? This is the real problem that we have in our societies. Biodiversity is falling very, very fast, and the window of opportunity to innovate, to save those species is shrinking. So your generation and your creativity is going to be the key to actually make a dent and slow down this rate, or even better, to reverse that trend. You have probably participated in the climate march in Hong Kong, or so you know what is happening. So what I would argue is citizen science is also changing the way we do science. And why is that? This is the way that we normally do science and when we do product development, even for environmental impact. You have scientists that would debate scientific theory, and there would be like a scientific crisis, and we'll come up with a new standard, new science, and then they would agree, and this will be the new science that will be then peer-reviewed and published. Then that can take already like more than a decade. And then typically you have engineers and designers and businessmen that would take this further. You would have investors and regulators that would agree on this. And eventually this is when it will come into the realm of the citizens and have an impact. But I would argue that this system is too slow, especially if we have this environmental emergency. I would argue that open source is going to be a huge part in citizen science to actually integrate those different parts. I don't say that scientists are irrelevant or politicians are irrelevant. Everybody is super important. But we need to work together to work faster. And I think open source is going to be a key to achieve that. So citizen science can collect data, can create new technology, can create new businesses, and they can help us to achieve environmental justice. Environmental justice, I'm going to skip that, is key to build a sustainable society. If you think about the job in the future, most people think, how can I make lots of money? And how can I use technology to maximize how much money I make? How can I use people as a human resource? And environment is typically at the very end of the priority. And I think this is true for 99% of businesses in Hong Kong. But if you think about it, if you don't have clean water to drink, if you don't have clean air to breathe, if you don't have biodiversity, you have a resilient ecosystem, there's no life. Hong Kong wouldn't exist if you don't have all these things. So I believe that we need to think of our business. Whether you are becoming a conservationist or if you're going to be working in business, I would argue that this is how we should organize business, that environment should be the top priority, then people, of course, and then money is just a form of technology. If you had to choose between a water filter and a pile of money, like I would definitely check water filtration. I need water, you know. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm very excited that you guys are interested about citizen science and conservation because we need you guys to work very hard and to be successful, and we need you to be effective so that we can have also environmental justice. So I'd like to finish with this quote, is that this is not going to happen by itself. We cannot pose as prophet and think, yeah, we care about the environment. We have to be more aggressive, influence policy. We have not only to write the paper, we have to go out and try to build those, I think, as non-profit, as businesses, because there's so little time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Jung-Harada, for sharing some of his works and his projects, as well as the importance of citizen science.